Aloha, super friend. It is I, Corey Leland, back to do another Ranking the Albums video. This year I'm ranking really what I feel is the best year for music ever. 1978. In 1978, I was only 14 years old, didn't turn 15 until November. Yeah, I'm a Scorpio. And 1978 for me is the best album in the history of music. Now, I'm not real familiar with the 60s because I was only a kid, obviously, very, very young kid. But 1978, I can't think of a better year for music. So let's get to it. I've got 13 albums here that I have copies of, but a couple honorable mentions from 1978. Queen put out an album. I've never really owned their albums except the greatest hits, but an album called Jazz. Some people think of it as their best, but it was produced by Roy Thomas Baker, who you'll see produced three or four albums in my list from 78. I mean, he's probably the best producer ever next to George Martin, who did all the Beatles records in America also. But Jazz had Fat Bottom Girls. I love that song. Um, Don't Stop Me Now, Bicycle Race. So Queen had an album. Roy Thomas Baker, producer, also produced a Foreigner record, the follow-up to Double Vision, which was huge, with Hot Blooded. But that next album Roy produced, it had Games, the title track, of course, Rev on the Red Line, Women, really love that song, Dirty White Boy. So not their best record, and it didn't do well commercially as well, nearly as well, because it had a horrible album cover, and album covers really can make a difference. But Uh, what else came out? The Who put out Who Are You in 78, the last album with drummer Keith Moon. I never got into Blondie, but a lot of people rave about their 1978 release, Parallel Lines. Steve Miller put out his greatest hits that year. So I've got 13 records here that I do have copies of, and I'm going to start with number, I think this is going to be 13 albums. At 13, the debut from Toto. Yeah, and guess what? This was the first concert I ever went to see Toto. I remember Hold the Line, the big single, the big hit from this record. Loved it. Heard it on the radio, wanted to go buy the album, rode my bike to the record store. Really thought they were a black artist. Thought they were African American. Got to the store, no, the Porcaro brothers, Jeff and Steve, and you got Steve Lukather, the guitar player who went on to play on, Michael Jackson's stuff. So many. Just a very sought after, played with everybody on guitar. David Page. I mean, these guys, killer studio musicians, played with so many artists. And anyway, my first concert I ever went to, Toto's debut, 1978. Being from Detroit and also being 14, I loved back in the day Ted Nugent put out Weekend Warriors in 78. Great song on here called Need You Bad. I really like that one. This era of Nugent, after Derek St. Holmes, the lead vocalist who was with him in all of his earlier years, had been dismissed. And Charlie Hune, I think is how you pronounce his last name, Huhn, lead singer. What a cool album cover too, right? Look at that painting. I mean, that sums up Ted Nugent, guns and guitars. And say what you want about him, courageous individual for being able to speak his mind in a world that doesn't always want to hear what he has to say. Let's see. After that, I'm going with another band that I loved back in the 70s and still do. REO Speedwagon put out You Can Tune a Piano, but You Can't Tune a Fish in 1978 with Roll with the Changes. Time for Me to Fly is on this one. Recorded at Sound City, the famous studio with so many great albums. Fleetwood Mac Rumors was recorded there, and Nevermind by Nirvana, I mean, just in everything in between, was made at Sound City in Van Nuys, in the San Fernando Valley. Coming up next, I've got this album, which was huge, 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 and the best year ever for music, 1978. Billy Joel released 52nd Street with the hits Big Shot, Honesty, My Life, which became the theme song for a while. For the first time, we saw Tom Hanks in a TV series. Tom Hanks and Pete Scolari were in, called Bosom Buddies. Funny sitcom. Billy Joel record, fan freaking tastic, especially those first three songs. After that, I've got, remember, this is 1978, the best year ever, according to me, for pop music. The Police came on the scene with Roxanne in 1978. Next to You, the opener, is a smoking hot track. I also like Born in the 50s, Truth Hits Everybody. This album, not one of my favorite Police albums, and I did do a Police album ranking, but you can't deny the Police debuted in 1978, the best year ever. Let's see. After that, I seem to have got them out of order a little bit. How did I do that? I'm going with, for my next favorite here, the Babies. I loved the Babies, and I just recently, a couple weeks ago, ranked my top Babies albums. I ranked all the Babies albums. There aren't that many, only 5. But this one has Every Time I Think of You. Great song. Head First is, of course, the title track. Another cool album cover. There's just so much creativity in the 70s that I don't see in 2025. But I love this record. Also came out in 78. Listened to it a ton. So I've got a total of 8 records here left from my favorite year ever in the history of the music world. Coming in at number 8, one of my favorite bands, remember I'm 14, was Kiss. And in 1978, Ace Frehley wanted to leave the band, lead guitarist, and they said, wait, don't. He wanted to do a solo album, so don't leave the band. You do a solo album, we'll all do solo albums. We'll put the Kiss logo on it, dedicate it to each other, and that's what happened. So Kiss put out 4 albums in 1978. This one's from Paul Stanley. These are my 2 favorites of the 4. And yeah, so I'm counting that Kiss solos as my number 8 favorite top album. Is it 8 or 7? It might be 7. Anyway, whatever it is, coming up after that, the much anticipated, it took them a while. And Tom Scholz, the songwriter, the guitar player from Boston, still says he felt they kept rushing him. They were hurrying. It was like 3 or 4 years we're waiting for the next album after their debut, which was just one of the best records ever. But this is their 1978 debut, Don't Look Back, which is a great tune. Party is on this. It's easy. This album is great, and I've listened to it a ton over the years. It's happy, good time, good vibe, feeling music. Oh, I see why. I've got 4 albums left on my top 13 albums from 1978. That's how many I own copies of for the CD. That's why that number. Another album produced by maybe the greatest rock and roll producer ever, after George Martin from the Beatles in America. Also produced this album, the first album that Steve Perry, the voice, is with Journey, Infinity. Wow. The big background vocal sound that you hear on Queen because of Roy Thomas Baker, the producer, is on. You listen to Wheel in the Sky from this album, Infinity Journey. Great song. They didn't write that one, but it's a great song and they do it so well. When the Lights Go Down in the City is on this record. This album has a vibe and a feel, a mood, an atmosphere like most albums just don't have. And you got to attribute a lot of that to the producer, Roy Thomas Baker, who that year also, we mentioned, did Queen, an album called Jazz, Foreigner. He also did this one. And one other we're going to talk about in a little bit. But coming up at my number 3 top album from the best year ever in the history of my life for music, for new album, was also the debut, not only of the Police debut, but the mighty Van Halen. Wow, I can still remember the first time I heard this album in 1978. Running with the Devil. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Eruption. You know about this album. Changed the sound of guitar. Everybody started playing like Eddie on this album after this. Or they tried to, anyway. Jamie's Crying. Great song. Of course, the cover of the Kinks song, You Really Got Me. Little Dreamer. Great stuff on here. Oh my gosh, the whole album is just gold, top to bottom. The mighty Van Halen with the greatest frontman ever, David Lee Roth, Diamond Dave. I think he's the most interesting person that I've ever heard, you know. I've read his books and amazing individual. Um, I've got 2 more records here. My top albums of 1978, which I've said a few times already, I think is the best year ever. Could largely be because I was only 14, 15, and those, years are very influential, as you know. If you think about the albums you listened to when you were 14, 15, and you probably still have a nostalgic place in your heart, but I can remember this one, and I have to say for me, Some Girls is my favorite Rolling Stones album. As great as albums like Sticky Fingers and Let It Bleed are, Some Girls, wow. Not only the title track, Some Girls, the great Keith Richards vocal on here, Before They Make Me Run. Rivals Happy is I think one of his best tracks. Beast of Burden, just a great song. Miss You was the big hit. I can still remember hearing it on the radio. Oh my gosh, Miss You is such a good song on here. And Shattered, maybe my favorite Rolling Stones of all time, Shattered. I could just hear it on an endless loop and never get tired of it. But Some Girls I've got as my number 2 album from 1978, my favorite year for music. And part of the reason why it's my favorite year in music is because I became just a huge, huge fan of this album, my number 1 album from 1978. Also produced by Roy Thomas Baker. How much great music can one producer make and release in one year? The debut from Boston, the Cars. The Cars. I remember waiting by my little clock radio that I had on my headboard to hear the song that was on the radio, Just What I Needed. I love that song. It still transports me all the way back to being a sophomore freshman in high school. Good Times Roll, Best Friend's Girl, Don't Just Stop, Bye Bye Love, You're All I've Got Tonight, Moving in Stereo, and the album Closer, All Mixed Up. Somewhere I'm on YouTube singing a campfire cover of All Mixed Up. But for me, again, produced by Roy Thomas Baker, and boy, did he do them a big favor with that big vocal sound that Queen and Journey also had on this. And he produced their first 4 records. Part of the reason why I love the Cars. Big reason, because I didn't love anything after he left them nearly as much. I also did a Cars ranking video. Anyway, that's my top 13 albums of 1978. Maybe I'll do 1979, which is darn close to as good, but not quite as good as 1978. Thanks for watching. Have a beautiful day. Happiness and peace. Top of the hour with Corey Leland.